Welcome to Shelby Stitcher. This is Joan Parker. I'm going to show you how I piece some of my string blocks on my setup. This basket is to the right of my sewing machine. This basket is where I'm going to toss in the pieces that are long enough to make another strip on my block. I keep my scissors here that somebody gave me. They are Karen Buckley. I enjoyed those so much at a retreat where I borrowed them that she said I could keep them. Here's a block that's in progress, and I'm showing that I have this much sewn together so far. I'm using onion paper for my 7-inch squares, and I'm going to make a block on how to make the template for this kite shape piece later today. And what I'm doing here is I found this aqua piece that's long enough. You can see how it extends over each side of that. I'm going to put these together, right sides together, with one hand, which is not as easy as it looks on a video. I'm going to run this through my machine with the length of my stitch reduced down to 1.8. I have a Janome 6700P. I have all my small pieces here that are too short or too narrow to do a block on their own. So as I have time, I am taking two lengths and sewing them together to make a long enough piece. And the other factors for this are that my trash can is right here. That's from putting the other pieces. And I'm keeping some long strips that I pulled out on my leg so I can use those as soon as I can. Now here's, if I pan to the left, this is where my little ironing station is. My clapper, my spray bottle, my mini iron, and my cup of ice water. I'm just going to sew a few of these pieces. So I put right sides together, making sure that this top edge is well enough over the piece of paper at the top so that when it's ironed out, it will cover it completely. I have this on 1.8 stitches per inch. Away we go. I hit my thread cutter button, take this one out and iron it quickly. If it has a seam in the strip, I will use the clapper, but if not, I usually don't need to. Now I need to find a piece that's wide enough and long enough for this, and I have this little snippet, and I think if I place it just right, it will cover that whole corner. The corner is hard to see because it's white against my white sewing machine, but I'm looking here and see how my point is sticking out as far as my longest part of that. So I slid it up so that I still have enough fabric down here and up there to cover the paper when it's turned out. So I'll put this on and see how it goes. Hit my thread cutter button and I'll fold that out right here to see if it covers, and it is perfect, which is ironic because lately I've had to remove a few. And here's my finished block. My camera's really close to my machine, so I'm not sure how well you can see all of that. But I will take this over to my cutting board, or my cutting station as I like to call it because it sounds fancy, and I will trim it down to the size of the paper, which is 7 inches. I was given many items this year so far donated to me by friends, and I love having that happen because I get so many interesting things that I wouldn't have used otherwise. As I was cleaning out my sewing room last week, I found all these kite-shaped pieces, and I centered them on my 7-inch paper, and you might recognize this paper. It's called onion skin, and if you're old enough to know what onion skin is, I think we can be friends, because I used that when I was a student back in the 80s in high school. Oh, sorry, the late 70s. I actually graduated in 1980, and I took a secretarial course, and we used onion skin for our copies that we would keep. You know, if you're in an office and you type a letter, you have a carbon copy that you type on onion skin because it's so much thinner. Well, there was a whole tablet of onion skin paper in one of the boxes I was given. So I'm using that for my foundation piecing paper right now because I can see through the onion skin to make sure that this first piece is lining up with this black line on my 1/4 inch paper, which is a good little trick. I also pay attention to where my paper, not my paper, but the edge of my new strip is landing on my presser foot so that I can line it up with that. It's been really fun to have two of my granddaughters who are cousins. One is 6 and one is 4. And on both of their last visits, they sewed on my sewing machine. There's a really neat feature on this Janome, and I'm not sure what it's called specifically, but I'm going to bring you over here so you can see it. On my machine is a button that says start and stop. And when you press that button, it starts sewing, and when you press it again, it stops. But you have to disengage the presser foot attachment. You have to undo that cord and it will pick up the signals from that button. And my 6-year-old granddaughter has been so eager to sew, and I have a very old clunky all plastic less than $100 Singer machine, but I can't even find it right now. I was looking for it when she was here and we couldn't find it, but she was okay with that because I let her sew on this one, and it was so easy just to let them sew using that start and stop button. And the speed can also be varied, and I turned it on a fairly low speed, and they were both just thrilled. But my other granddaughter was over here last night, and she used it last night because her cousin had used it, and she thought that would be a great time to ask. So here I've got blue and green so far, and I'm going to look for a red. And I have this new strip that I just added to my strip box, and it's a thimbleberries. It's very dark, but you know, I think it might work on this. And how I see if it will cover the entire piece is you can see where the edge of my green fabric is, and that's the edge of my paper. And I line it up down here, and you can see that it is extending by, there's the point, and it extends out by much more than 1/2 inch. And I'm not going to cut off that selvage, which I would do if it were going to be on the paper, but I'm just going to move it up so that it's already off the paper when I start. And I'm going to do this seam just a tiny bit thinner just to make sure that it covers that point, because it's very frustrating to get to the end and realize after you iron it out that you just missed it by 1/4 inch. When that does happen, and it does happen occasionally, I just snip off a little bit of this part that's sticking off beyond the paper and sew that onto the very end, which gives me a seam very close to the corner, but that's better than ripping out these tiny stitches from the paper. And I'm going to show you here, I'm pressing this, and it's looking beautiful, and it is covering the entire paper. You see the paper against my hand, and so that one just makes it. And then I'll go back and do the other half of this, and I mix up the colors. The only real rules I have for this is that I don't use the same color in the same block. Of course, as you're moving them around on your design wall, you're getting many colors and many patterns all mixed up together. So what I like to do is use up a whole strip at one sitting. I don't want to keep handling it. But these ones that are with the fabric, I just don't like to do them all at one time, because I like doing one block, and here I am flipping it forward, leaving a good 3/8 inch over the paper and trimming it off with scissors. And I'm going to drop that into my scrap box over here on my right. Because you're using so many blocks in the quilt, it's not that noticeable if you have 5 or 6 of them that are the same fabric in the same place. But to make it less eye-catching, I do like to trim it down to a slightly narrower length if I have many of the same one, or if it's a very outstanding color. Now here I've got red, green, blue, and then a multicolor plaid that's brown in the background and aqua, orange, and gold on the top. And I'm looking for some of the pieces I've already used. And this one's a very odd one because it's solid and because it's purple. I don't have very much purple in this quilt, but it's eyeballing it. I think this one, yes, it's just going to make it. It's just a 1/4 inch over both sides. And I already have 2 other pieces of this in my quilt, in my blocks that I've already gotten up on my design wall. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this, sew this one on, and not have to trim it all. And I like that my machine has a thread cutting button. And so far, at least, it doesn't make a bird's nest on the bottom if I don't hold the thread on the top. I had this exact model of sewing machine before, and it suddenly died in every way. And I had to hold the thread, even though the handbook said I wouldn't have to hold the thread when I started the beginning of the stitching line. And I was very glad to learn that I didn't have to do that, because when you use the thread cutter, this little tail is so short, there's not very much to grab there. And I'm all about the do it quickly and make it easy. So here's the back of my block, and you can see up here where I've started sewing without holding the thread, how it doesn't really make a little bird's nest, which is lovely. So this block is also ready for trimming and taking the papers off. I'm taking our car up to the mechanics in just a little bit, and I'll just go ahead and trim and depaper those up there. Remember to use it up, wear it out, make it do, or do without. Please like and subscribe. Thank you.